All right, here we go. Episode number 2 of Bicoastal Baseball with Mike Guido and Dalton Brown. It is great to have you with us. Listen, we did all the happy-go-lucky shit, whatever it was, last episode, so we don't really have to generally introduce ourselves. I'm Mike, that's Dalton, and we're ready to go. We have regular season baseball coming up in Seoul, South Korea. That's coming up in a couple of days. I know Dalton's excited about that. It's Dodgers Padres there. Should be looking forward to that. Coming up in a little bit, our 1-2-3 inning, what we make of the Dylan Cease trade. We'll discuss that. Dalton, we had I think kind of mixed reviews on this. Padres maybe buying at the top end of the market. We'll discuss that. We'll preview the games in Seoul that are going to be kicking off on Wednesday. We have some award predictions coming up later in the show. We'll be predicting Rookie of the Year, MVP, Cy Young for both leagues before the season gets started. We'll be previewing the AL and NL Central divisions. We did the West last week. We'll do the Central divisions this week. And then Dalton's Hot Corner to close out the show a little bit later, where Dalton gives you a couple more betting picks to put you put a little bit more money in your pocket. So Dalton, how are we feeling on this Monday night? I know that you're excited for Wednesday. What's kind of your feeling right now?
I mean, there's a lot to be excited about in general, and I know everybody in the world's thinking about March Madness. I am too. I don't blame you at all.
Yep.
My hopes aren't very high for Duke, but great opportunity here to talk baseball because right on the back end of March Madness, it's going to be full attention to the baseball world, and I'm really excited for that. And hey, we got a couple regular season games this week to talk about. Obviously we still have quite a bit of intrigue with some of the players still left out there. So
yeah,
plenty to go over.
Absolutely. So let me kick off the show with this. As Dalton says, there are still players out there, and I think we would be remiss to not at least mention them. Well, luckily, part of my Yankee rant of today, right? Because this is how we start every show. If you're not familiar already, I'm a diehard Yankee fan. Dalton's diehard Dodger fan. So we're going to begin by catering to our own fan bases just for a little bit of a rant to begin each show. So here's the thing with the Yankees. So positives. Garrett Cole, there's no tear. He had about 5 or 6 different doctors say, okay, there's no tear. He'll come back this season. Okay, listen, do I wish he didn't get hurt at all? Yes, but that's almost best case scenario, because when you hear 30-year-old elbow injury, you're just like, oh, God, it's over. And you just go into full-blown panic. Okay, that's one thing. However, I do think that the urgency, and that's the key word here, urgency in the front office should be heightened. It very easily should be heightened, because are you really going to be able to rely on, like I said, Carlos Rodon, question mark, Nestor Cortez, question mark. Is Marcus Stroman going to be the guy that you sign? Is he going to be first half Marcus Stroman from last year or second half Marcus Stroman from last year? So there's a lot of question marks here. There was a report that came out the other day that said that Blake Snell and the Houston Astros had some mutual interest. Yeah, I think that's enough for me. I think that that's enough for me to say, okay, I think the Yankees really should get in on this now. I know that nobody wants to meet his number, and it's very clear that that's the case. Nobody wants to meet Blake Snell's number. That's why it's why he's still out there, right? The number that he wants is just not realistic. Teams are like, look, dude, in between these 2 Cy Young years, you've got a bunch of pretty league average. Like, that's kind of what he is. However, and I think Dalton can agree with this, Blake Snell is one of those pitchers where his ceiling is unbelievably high, but his floor is pretty darn low. So you're going to get something on, like I said, either somewhere in the middle there, which is what he's usually, but most of the time, or I shouldn't say most of the time, at least some of the time, he's at the upper end of the spectrum. So listen, I am nervous because, and I don't know how real the Astros' interest is, but if I'm the Yankees, Dalton, I think just the fact that the Astros name got thrown out there, I mean, you've been perennially losing to them for the last 7 years, 8 years. I mean, just them being in the mix scares the crap out of me.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's difficult for the Yankees to make any other argument in against them going after Snell that isn't some other way of just saying, "Hey, we're cheap. We want to save some." Right? I mean, at this point, that's the only thing that they can possibly
Yeah.
say is we're just cheap asses about this, and that is what it is. Because it makes too much sense. Now I get it, right? The luxury tax number is crazy. The
Right.
amount that they would end up paying him, the amount that they'd end up
It's
paying
like
is crazy. But
63 million. Like if they paid him 30, they would really be paying 60 or whatever, 63. Like,
yeah,
yeah, it's a lot, but still.
but Mike, that's not your money. That's not my money, right?
It's right.
So figure it out, guys. I think that's kind of the right way to look at these things as a fan.
Yeah.
And you'll hear me in general, right? I don't give a shit about these owners' pockets, man. Like just as a general rule,
Yeah.
like when fans of certain teams are like, yeah, well, like, hey, we were competitive despite the fact that we weren't spending much money, and it's like, yeah, doesn't
Yeah.
that piss you off? Like, doesn't that
Yep.
piss you off that if your ownership would have spent more and invested more in the team, like they certainly can, that
Mhm.
your team wasn't better? So, no, I mean, look, at a certain point, it's just how badly do you want it, right?
Yeah.
And we're gonna find out here in the next. I sure hope the next week or two.
Do you think it's still because last week you predicted that it was I predicted the Yankees weeks ago, and I'm not moving off it. But do you think it's still the Yankees for Snell, or has your opinion kind of shifted?
Well, the only real smoke we've seen is the Astros,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So to me, the Astros are kind of the incumbent leader in the clubhouse to sign him now, just in
Mm,
terms of like what smoke is out there.
yeah,
Um, but I have no clue, man. Like at this point, it's hard to rule any contender that wants pitching out. Like if you told me that tomorrow he was going to sign with the Dodgers, I would not like blow you off as that being absurd.
yeah,
If you told me that he was going to sign with the Giants, if you even told me he was going to sign in Seattle, where all they have is pitching, like at this point, it's hard to argue that anybody's out of it. If you ask me if you ask me to name four teams, which is absurd that we're still at a stage where we're naming four
I
teams, but if
know.
you ask me to name four, I'd say Yankees, Astros, Angels, Giants.
Yeah,
Whereas right now, I would argue it's probably Yankees or Astros. And if you're the Astros, if you're the Yankees, it's like you maybe shouldn't let that happen.
yeah,
But
right.
we'll see.
Yeah, it really is scary to me. Will Warren, I think, is kind of picturing himself in the 5 spot right now in the rotation with Garrett Cole hurt, and he just got shelled his last time out. So I'm not sure how confident I feel in that. But all right, let's hear from the resident Dodger fan. All right, Dalton, what's on your mind in that fan base today?
Yeah, I mean, for the Dodger rant of the week, things are pretty relaxed. At the
Yeah,
moment,
it's not really much of a rant. It's more
you
of
know,
a
there are good vibes as there should be right before the season starts. The teams in Korea trying all kinds of food, beating up on the Kiwoom Heroes and Team Korea. They've looked really good. It's been fun to watch them actually come out in the white Dodger uniforms and play a couple games. One of them was at 11 p.m. Eastern on a Saturday night, so I caught a good bit of that one. I did not wake up at 6 o'clock to watch them take on Team Korea today. But it should be a lot of fun this week. I'm trying not to put too much stock in it. As far we'll get to those games a little bit more later on, but as far as some commentary on news around the Dodgers, the big thing is obviously Gavin Stone was given the nod as our number 5 starter.
yeah,
I'm excited for that kid. For a lot of the early part of last season, it was Gavin Stone and Bobby Miller. Those two guys were waiting to get called up. And Gavin Stone came up and struggled with command, got hit around. He got thrown into some really brutal matchups out of the gate. And it didn't go so hot for him. But, his stuff looks really good this spring. The results have looked really good. I think he's earned that 5 spot. So I'm excited to see the Dodgers just kind of roll with that and see what he can do and give him a little bit of a runway because the talent is definitely there with him. The other thing, obviously I talked last week a little bit about the defense concerns around the infield. We'll see, right? I mean, Muncy made a great play. I guess it was early this morning against Team Korea. We'll see how that ends up looking. The other thing is some people are a little worried about Yamamoto because the numbers in spring haven't been great. I would probably push back with that. The stuff has looked really good. Spring is spring. You never know what guys are working on. And the batting average on balls in play against him is hovering above 500 right now. That's not going to continue. Normal BABIPs are closer to 300. And when you watch, it's pretty easy to tell why, right? The infield defense has let him down. Guys aren't making plays.
Yeah.
So I'm really not too worried with Yamamoto. I'm excited to see him in game action this week. He'll be starting the second game of that series against Joe Musgrove. That should be an awesome pitching match. I have more to say about Musgrove too later in the show as well. But that'll be it'll be a fun couple days. So nothing too pressing in the Dodger world right now.
No, I don't think there is, and I'm going to be excited to watch the Yamamoto start. I agree. It looks like to me a lot of the contact, as far as what I've seen, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, a lot of the contact that's being given up by Yamamoto is pretty weak. It's not a whole lot of hard contact, which is honestly, when he was a free agent, that's what everybody was talking about. Is this guy is just gonna, like, if his stuff is going to be nasty, he doesn't throw 101, right? But he throws 95 with a ton of movement and a lot of late life. So what does that do? It gets a lot of ground balls. It gets a lot of weak contact. So that's kind of what I was expecting out of Yamamoto anyway. Okay, so let us dive in officially into the 1-2-3 innings. So the first out, Dylan Cease, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't see this coming. I know that there were some talks that were circulating, but listen, that happens all the time and nothing really comes to fruition. But Dylan Cease was officially traded from the Chicago White Sox to the San Diego Padres. The Padres getting Dylan Cease in return. Listen, I know the top guy they got in the deal was Drew Thorpe, a guy in the Yankee system that I really, really loved. I mean, listen, I know we got Juan Soto, but giving up Drew Thorpe hurts. I think he's going to be a real good player. San Diego's number 5 prospect, number 85 overall in Major League Baseball, according to MLB Pipeline. An outfielder, Samuel Zavala, San Diego's number 7 prospect. Another right-handed pitcher in Jairo Iriarte, the San Diego number 8 prospect. And then another Major League arm in Steven Wilson, another right-handed pitcher, goes from the Padres to the White Sox. So Cease for Thorpe, Zavala, Iriarte, and Steven Wilson. The first thing I kind of want to throw out there, Dalton, is I was really expecting, based on how the negotiations were being broadcasted to the public, it really sounded like the White Sox were being unbelievably unreasonable. They wanted top dollar for every, and I don't want to pretend like this package isn't something. It is, but I was expecting more. I mean, just how late this dragged into the spring, and how almost tight the White Sox were from trading him to anybody. First of all, honestly, my first takeaway is that I don't want to ever hear that the Yankee tax doesn't exist from anybody. Okay. The Yankees were in on this. And I know I don't want to circle everything back to the Yankees, but just getting this off my chest, right? The White Sox were like, if you're getting Dylan Cease from us, we need Spencer Jones. Spencer Jones is our top prospect. We're not giving you Spencer Jones, especially, by the way, and Cease's stats weren't in the graphic, but he had a 4.58 last year. I know he had a great 2022, but his 2023 was as mid can get. So I'm kind of surprised by the return. What say you?
I think the return was when I see the Padres making a deal, I assume it's going to be as loud as possible. So I think I was expecting to see a little bit more in the return, but still, I mean, you're talking 3 of their top 8 prospects from what is a pretty decent farm system because of the Soto trade and other trades that they've made. I think at the end of the day, it's just the Padres are just weird, man. Like you trade away Soto for prospects because you're trying to, not be in a position to have to pay a guy. And I know you don't have to pay Cease yet, right? There are a couple years of control there, but like you're pushing out the payday on this guy 1 year from where it was on Soto, but Soto is a much more valuable player than Dylan Cease.
Oh yeah.
And you're giving up 3 of your top 8 prospects for, like you said, a pitcher whose ERA was in the mid 4s last year, a guy who can struggle with command. And look, Dylan Cease is really special when he's on. But he's probably not better than Blake Snell right now. For me, I actually wouldn't have him as the best pitcher in that rotation. I think that's Joe Musgrove, but
You're right.
um, I think the Padres are just weird, man. Like I don't get it. Right? It's like are we building? Are we getting prospects? Like what's the plan? Sometimes I think they just like to make noise, and I think they recognize that the narrative around them was, oh, the Padres were average last year, and now they're giving up. Um, and sometimes I think that's kind of how Preller operates. Is he's just like hell we are. We're not giving up.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. It's an overpay when you look at what the results have been with Cease. It might not be an overpay when you look at the potential with Cease and the fact that the White Sox are not exactly the ideal place to develop as a pitcher. So um, we'll see how it turns out. I just think the whole thing's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I so I took a gander, and this is kind of out of my depth because I'm a very like, feet on the ground kind of guy. I'm not somebody that likes to float a lot into, I value analytics, but I don't ever bother to learn them. I just kind of say that they exist and they're important, and that's really the end of it. But you might be proud of me, Dalton, as I actually took a look at his baseball savant page the other day, and like, there's no question that the stuff is there, right? Like his whiff rate is in the 84th or 85th percentile. He's getting swings and misses, right? He's definitely fooling guys. But like when he's not fooling guys, that ball finds the barrel a lot. Like he's among like the bottom quarter of the league when it comes to like giving up hard hit baseballs when he's not on. You know what I mean? So like I kind of found it funny because you sent me a text when the Cease trade happened, and you were just like, you know what? This is typical Padres. They buy at the top of the market virtually every time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? It's so true that that's the case because they've done it with almost everybody. They did it with Bogarts. They did it with Machado. They did it with Darvish. They've done it with everybody that's virtually on that roster. So you kind of had, and I'll pull up the graphic again, right? Because this is kind of where the National League West kind of shapes up now as far as where the projections go. Now you think Pacoda is a little bit lower on the Padres. Does this make them any better in your mind?
Oh, sure. I mean, why wouldn't it, right?
Mhm.
It makes the rotation one more good arm deeper.
Yeah.
Whether Cease ends up being a star or whether Cease ends up being just pretty good. Either way, it makes the rotation one arm deeper, and I don't think the prospects that they traded away were going to make a major league impact this year. So,
Yeah.
in terms of does it make them better this year? Yes, sure. And I think that I'm going to have some things to say about the Padres later on in the show in a couple different segments, but
Yeah.
so I think it makes them better. And you heard me say it last week. I think the Padres in general are an underrated team coming into this year. When you look up and down that roster, it's still pretty damn strong.
Yeah.
So, I think it makes them better this year. I just think that why make the Soto trade if you're gonna do this? Like, why
Yeah.
not hold on to Soto and truly go all in? That's the part of it that doesn't make sense to me. Just the pairing of those two moves makes for just a really weird situation.
It does. I mean, if you look at this rotation, and we'll move on in a second, but because if you look at this rotation, it definitely does help it, and it gives them, if they were a postseason team, it gives them a legit four-man playoff rotation, right? With Musgrove,
Mhm.
Darvish, and kind of insert Dylan Cease wherever you want here, but Musgrove, Darvish, Dylan Cease, and Michael King is a legitimate playoff rotation. Like that, that's a
Yeah.
real playoff rotation, and trust me on Michael King, that kid's going to be so good. Like I said, if I had the chance to trade Clark Schmidt and Chase Hampton before we traded Michael King and Drew Thorpe, I would have taken that in a millisecond. But anyway, so Dylan Cease ends up going to the Padres. Not where I expected him to go by any means. If you would have asked me at the beginning of the offseason where he was headed, the Padres, I'm not even sure would have been on my list with the fact of, for a lot of the reasons that you described of, listen, they couldn't make payroll, right? Like
Right.
they kind of needed to get into a position where they needed to rebuild or not even rebuild, just kind of restructure, send some money away to get ourselves in a more comfortable position. And now you're pretty much just delaying the payment for another year for a guy that you're probably going to want to keep. So Interesting stuff there. Okay, so let's go to the second out here. We have baseball on Wednesday, regular season, actual baseball, Dalton Brown, and it is with the team that we were just discussing, the San Diego Padres, taking on your beloved Los Angeles Dodgers, who some would argue, and I'm pretty sure almost all would argue, had the best offseason of any team in Major League Baseball, getting Shohei Ohtani on a mostly deferred, that still makes me want to puke, the mostly deferred contract, and getting Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who I desperately wanted in the Bronx. That also kind of makes me want to puke. So we do have games. We will see Yamamoto pitch in South Korea over the week. But the first pitching matchup, I mean, it's going to be a good one, right? Another new arm in the Los Angeles rotation. It's going to be Tyler Glasnow against Joe Musgrove. Two pitchers where, I mean, at the very top of their game, I think you and I can both argue that both Glasnow and Musgrove can be as good as virtually anybody in the game when they're at the top of their game. What do you make about these matchups right now as we head into South Korea?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be a ton of fun. You know, it's going to require me to get up at an ungodly hour, so that's not going to be fun. But
Yeah.
you know, I'm looking forward to seeing Glasnow pitch because all signs point to the fact that he's fully healthy, and a fully healthy season of him, sky's the limit. I'm really excited to see how that looks. You know, and I think Darvish, we'll see. You know, I think the Dodgers have a pretty decent chance to touch him up in game one. This is a guy whose expected ERA has gone up in 3 consecutive years. Obviously, last year the numbers weren't great in general. The ERA was around 4.5. Now, the expected numbers suggest that he wasn't quite as bad as he looked, but he's 37. He's not getting younger. The stuff's not getting better. He just posted his highest walk rate since before the pandemic. So, you know, I'm not super bullish on Darvish. I know he hates the Dodgers. He's kind of like, that's kind of been his new thing, is that he hates the Dodgers. And he's been really outspoken about not understanding why Japanese guys are signing there. And it's a lot of sour grapes with him. And it's a bummer because I really liked him as a Dodger. I thought he got a bit of a raw deal in 2017 in terms of the way that he was received by fans. Somewhat understandably so, but also he was a big reason why the Dodgers made that run. I digress, but I think second matchup too will be really fun. Obviously, we get to see Yamamoto finally. I want the Dodgers to, get him in and out healthy. We don't need to push him for 7 or 8 innings if he looks good. Get him in and out healthy with a start he feels good about. Yes, it's a regular season game, but it's not the end of the world. Musgrove's going to be a tough matchup. I think Musgrove Yamamoto is going to be the better of the 2 pitching matchups because I think the Dodgers might touch up Darvish a little bit.
Yeah, I must have screwed up the pitching matchups, right? So it's Glasnow, Darvish, Musgrove, Yamamoto. Yamamoto game 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I'm excited to see that second matchup. You know, I think I'm also really excited to see the Padres bullpen. The additions they made with Yuki Matsui and I think Go is the other guy's name.
Yeah,
I'm interested to see if those kind of out on a limb investments end up making sense for them because they went after those guys. And I don't really know what to make of it. It's one of those things that, like, if that investment pays off, it's going to look really good, really quick. Obviously that bullpen doesn't have Hader anymore, but it's still going to be an above average bullpen. I think the Padres have a well above average rotation. I think they have a well above average lineup. I think it's a good ball club. So, it'll be a fun couple games to watch. I'm hoping Graham Pauley makes his major league debut because he's a Duke guy. So, I wouldn't mind seeing him come up with a couple hits, but ultimately I'm hoping the Dodgers win a couple games.
Yeah. I'm kind of glad it makes our graphics look a little bit better when JP Morosi reported that Jackson Merrill won the starting center field job for San Diego. I think that's what a lot of people expected. And listen, we're going to talk about the White Sox a little bit later. And I feel similarly about the White Sox because it feels like to me that the top of this Padres lineup is very strong, right? Tatis Jr., Bogarts, Cronenworth, Manny Machado, Ha-Sung Kim. Like these are all guys that are going to be there for a while. And I know that the Padres like Luis Campusano a lot too, as their future catcher.
Yeah, that kid can hit. Campusano's good.
Yeah. And look, the issue that I have, and maybe I'm nitpicking, but it just feels like, I'll pull the graphic up again before I pull it down. But the bottom of this lineup with Profar, Pauly, and Merrill is, I mean, that's what worries me, is that like this is a very top heavy sort of lineup with a lot of if going down in the bottom of the lineup. And maybe, because again, I understand how the game works, right? The top of your lineup is usually where the good hitters hit, and the bottom of the lineup is where you're not so good hitters hit. I get that, but I don't know. It just it sticks out to me. That's why I had them a little bit lower in my standing predictions than you did. I don't know. I'm a little iffy. On where they stack up in those spots.
I mean, if they don't get a ton of production out of the bottom three hitters in their lineup, they have a good enough farm system and they have an aggressive enough front office that they'll address that over time.
It's true.
And that team badly wants to compete in the NL West, and that top six is pretty darn strong. So I'll be honest, if that's the best you can do as far as nitpicking the Padres, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for you to also argue that that's a below 500 team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm going to have plenty more on them later on, so I'll let it go for now.
Yeah. Well, hey, look, and I know that maybe it's just because I'm kind of stuck looking at this, and I'm just saying, okay, well, this is just not, fair.
Yeah, I mean the comparing the Dodgers to the Padres is not really fair to the Padres. You know what I mean?
No.
I don't think anybody's predicting the Padres to beat the Dodgers in the division, but I do think they're a wild card team.
Yeah. Well, hey, they very easily could be. And you've done a lot of convincing as far as that's concerned with me. All right, so let's go to the third out as we wrap up our 1-2-3 inning. Let's give some award predictions. Now, here's the thing, and I just want to, I tried to make this as not chalk as I possibly could, but it's hard sometimes, right? Because sometimes the favorite is the favorite for the reason. So let's start in the American League. Actually, you know what? How about we do this? Rookie of the year. We'll go Rookie of the Year, Cy Young, MVP. We'll go that way. Rookie of the Year here. Dalton, who do you got in the American League for your favorite for Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, so obviously the top three candidates, you've got, Evan Carter, Jackson Holiday. My guy though is Wyatt Langford. I think, he's sitting there at 4-1 on DraftKings. And to me, he's the biggest long shot out of those three. Not that any of them are long shots by any means, but what this kid's done in spring training has been ridiculous. He's hitting 368 in spring training. You look throughout his minor league career, he's a 360 hitter who's homering once every 8 at bats. Like, yeah, I mean, this kid's been ridiculous. And he was he was that way in college too. So the fact that, if they're going to give him this kind of chance, to me, he's the kind of guy you take a chance on just blowing up immediately. And that's a lineup that's good enough that, he'll see a lot of pitches to hit. So I'm excited to see what, I think Wyatt Langford with the Rangers, he's probably my pick now, but I could see any of these guys winning it.
Yeah. I that's kind of, I kind of found this as my least exciting pick out of all of them, I think, because I have the other Ranger guy. I have Evan Carter. I just think you and I discussed this last week. Like, you and I are kind of both under the impression that, listen, Evan Carter's 21 years old, and he's already performing at a high level in World Series games. Like this kid's a pretty strong young man. So yeah, I have Evan Carter. He's plus 300 on DraftKings to win the award. Listen, I just think what he did last year as a young kid, hitting over 300, he had the OPS over 1,000. Listen, the fact of the matter is, for me, is that I think the experience plays a lot for him. He's going to go into the major leagues already this season in a high run producing spot in the lineup, right? Like, there very easily could be lineups, and this might even be where their lineup starts the season, where it's Simeon, Seager, and Carter, and that's really where they're going to start out. So he's going to be in a prime run producing spot. I think his numbers, at least for parts of the season, could be pretty gaudy. Like, you talk about Wyatt Langford as big of a hitter as he is, and he no doubt is. But Evan Carter has proven that he can hit at the major league level and in big situations. So I think I favor him just a little bit for the award in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a crazy thing to do at all. The only real counter that pops into my mind
Mhm.
is, teams kind of have a little bit of a book on him now. They've seen him
Yeah,
at the major league level, so there might be a little bit of a better scouting report with him coming out of this offseason. But
right.
no, I don't think there's a wrong pick out of any of those three guys. I mean, Jackson Holliday's resume speaks for itself too. So
Yeah,
we'll see. And I
yeah.
know I'm excited to talk about the NL side because I know you and I are in lockstep there.
I know. Well, let's just spoil it for the listener now. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, he's the clear favorite on pretty much, I think, pretty much every betting platform. I'm pretty sure he's the betting favorite. I had him at plus 175. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, listen, I think he's the clear pick right now just because, look, he dominated in Japan. He was, look, the reality is that his stuff is nasty. And I think part of the other, not really to take away from him, the National League Rookie of the Year candidates, I don't think are as strong this year as they've been in years past. I just don't think so. Like, if you just look at the field, right? I just don't know that it's there for anybody to really take away from him. Listen, man, I love the stuff, and I'm biased because I wanted him in the Bronx so badly, but he's going to generate a lot of weak contact. He obviously plays for the prime team in the NL West. Everybody they play is going to be playing below them. So it's just, and I think he's going to be, obviously he's going to be a prime starter in that rotation. You're going to get a lot of innings. He's going to get a lot of starts. I think the opportunities are just there for him. So Yamamoto is my guy. I know he's your guy too, but tell me why we're both right.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on almost all of it. I mean, to put it in context, right? He's plus 175. Jung Hoo Lee at plus 400 is the only other guy probably worthy of even consideration at this
Yeah.
point. Now, Rookie of the Year is the kind of award where some years a dude just comes out of nowhere, and by the time you realize that he's going to be the one, the odds are already not bettable. So you never know in that category, but it's difficult to argue when you've got a guy who's currently number 4 in DraftKings Cy Young odds in the NL.
Yeah.
I mean, ahead of him, you've got Strider, Wheeler, and Webb. That's it. He's ahead of Zach Gallen in Cy Young odds, Max Fried, Tyler Glasnow. That's how he's being viewed in the market. So you're telling me this guy's being viewed as better than Max Fried and Zach Gallen right now, and he's not going to win Rookie of the Year?
Yeah. Right.
It kind of speaks for itself. So we'll see, right? It's a lot of hype for him to live up to. I think you might find me preaching patience in May if he has a couple rough starts because I think like kids new to the major leagues. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I'm obviously really excited about it.
Yeah. I'm telling you, he's going to give up 4 or 5 runs in the first 2 innings of his first start. And you know what you're going to hear? You're going to hear a bunch of guys from the Bronx shouting across the country. See, I knew he wasn't worth 325. That's exactly what they're going to do because we're loud and annoying.
Yeah. Well, have your fun for those 2 innings, and we'll see where we're at in a couple years.
That's right. All right, let's go to, speaking of which, let's go to Cy Young, American League Cy Young. I have an interesting pick here, but I'm going to let you go first on this one because I think, honestly, from a betting perspective, I actually think this is pretty good value too.
Yeah, so my pick for American League Cy Young is George Kirby. I think George Kirby at 13-1. This guy was just really good last year and really consistent. And I don't want to touch on all the same things I said last week, right? Because last week I talked about the fact that he just doesn't miss the zone. The 2.5% walk rate last year was ridiculous. The fastball velo is strong. The chase rate's high, despite the fact that he's in the zone all the time. Pitching run value 96th percentile last year. Fastball run value 98th percentile last year. The guy's just a stud, and he's really consistent, and he's in a pitcher's park, and he's surrounded by a good rotation. He's going to eat innings. To me, at 13-1 in a league that doesn't have any like killer candidates for it, like Garrett Cole probably missing a month or two, that's going to make it hard for him to win that award. Doesn't mean he can't, but it's going to make it hard.
But the fact that he still can, in a sense, I think speaks to something in the American League as far as pitching.
Sure, sure. You look at Kevin Gausman, like good pitcher. I don't know if he's a guy that I think is that consistent though. Same thing with Framber Valdez. A lot of the advanced metrics on Valdez said that he's due for negative regression. So
Mhm.
we'll see about that. Burns is great, but going from the NL Central to the AL East, that's going to be worth something. So we'll
Yeah,
see. So for me, it's a pretty wide open field, and I think he's the best pitcher on a really good staff. So I'm going with Kirby at 13-1.
I know. I feel like that's a stronger opinion than you think it is. That George Kirby is the best pitcher on that staff. Luis Castillo is very, very, very good.
Yeah, he is.
It may be considered you might be treading into hot take territory there, Dalton Brown. I'm just saying.
I'm fine with it,
Um,
man. I'll ride that take into the season, and we'll see. I drafted George Kirby in fantasy last season. And I got him a great value, and he carried me to an 18-2 record. So
yeah. Well, hey. Well, okay. Well, then listen. The record. Let the record speak for itself. Let's just say that. All right. So American League Cy Young. I want to get your thoughts on this because I think he could be set up for a career year, especially, and we're going to touch on it in a little bit, for the shape that division is in. I really think that Pablo Lopez has a good shot at winning this award. I really do. I look, the reality is for me with Pablo Lopez is that he's going into his age 28 season, and it just seems like he's going to enter the prime of his career. He's going to give you innings. The last 2 years, he's been putting over 180 innings under his belt. He's the ace of that staff in Minnesota. And truth be told, he's going to get numerous starts against, and again, I'd be lying if I said that this wasn't part of the deciding factor where he could be gouging his stats a little bit by facing weaker competition, but he's going to get multiple starts, I'm sure, against Kansas City, against Chicago, against the Detroit Tigers. Like, he's going to be getting starts against weaker teams. Listen, I saw him at DraftKings. I saw him at DraftKings today at plus 1,400 for the award. I think that's pretty serious value. The stuff has really always been there for him. It's about him putting it all together. In the last 3 years or so, he really kind of has, and he's been really productive in Minnesota. What do you make about that?
no, if you told me Dalton, you can't pick George Kirby, you got to go somewhere else. Probably the next place I'd look. And for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, that division is awful. But man, you take a look at his baseball savant page, it is all red. And that's good for folks who don't look at baseball savant much. We're talking 95 percentile chase rate, 87 percentile K rate, 93rd percentile expected ERA, pitching run value at 98th percentile. There's no real way to look at it and not view him as one of the best pitchers in baseball with who he was last year.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. He's pitching in a division where he should be able to dominate. I also don't think it hurts that he's pitching in the cold in April and in September. It's hard to hit when it's cold, man. So I think it's a good pick. I think it's a good pick. Hey, I got the Twins hat on for a reason. One of my best buddies works for the team, and they're definitely my AL team. So I hope you're right. I'd love to see it.
Yeah. Hey, listen, my great uncle Paul, who's the brother-in-law of my dad's sister, grew up in Southeast Minnesota. I always have had a soft spot for the Minnesota Twins. Always root for them to do well. They just seem like, and again, we don't have to go too crazy on this, but they've always seemed like a relatively likable team for me. Also because they lose to the Yankees in pretty serious fashion every year in the postseason anyway. So I don't really have a reason not to like them.
You're preaching to the choir on that. My fiance and I go up there. We go to Minneapolis on July 4th every year and visit my buddy who works for the Twins, and we get to hang out in the Delta Sky Club for a couple games. And the people that you meet up there are a different kind of nice.
Yeah.
So it's an easy franchise to root for. It's a really underrated ballpark. I can't recommend Target Field enough.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a really, really a fun fan experience. So
yeah. One game I went there was in the Delta Sky Club, and we ran into Paul Molitor there. We ran into PJ Fleck. Like there were definitely some guys there, some notable names in the Delta Sky Club. They have a good fan base over there in Minnesota. So, all right, let's go to the National League. I'm chalk on this one, man. I got Spencer Strider. Like I just think this is the year, I think, where he gets it done. I just do. I think at this point, some would consider it, from a truth perspective, because I know he finished fourth in the Cy Young voting last year, but he had a 3.86 ERA, right? Like I think a lot of people kind of viewed that as like, we kind of didn't expect that. But listen, from what he had the season before, he's going to give you the innings, right? 186 and 2/3 last year. He led the majors in strikeouts. K per 9 was unbelievable. One of the things that I love, by the way, this is one of my favorite stats in baseball is fielding independent pitching. I think that that's a really valuable stat because it just goes to show you what your ERA would be with league average defense. And I think that that's a really valuable stat to go off of. I just think as far as, him entering, he's still outrageously young. He's entering his age 25 season. And again, it's sort of a similar reason for Pablo Lopez. The NL East is a much better division than the AL Central. But you and I have even discussed this separately where, you're kind of seeing a Nationals team that isn't very good, a Mets team that I think could very easily digress. The Marlins really haven't done much to help themselves in this offseason. So you're kind of dealing with another guy who could be facing much more inferior teams when it comes to a lot of the starts that he's going to make. And again, I just feel like eventually one of these years, the stuff is just all going to come together and he's just going to have an unbelievable season, right? Because as far as stuff is concerned, Spencer Strider is one of the best in the game. Kind of boring because I know it's kind of chalk. He's plus 450 for the award, but what do you think? Spencer Strider on that?
I mean, I don't think it's a bad pick in terms of like if you're just trying to pick a winner. I mean, he certainly has the ability to win the award.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more concerned with betting value. That's just kind of where I'm like.
That's just how your mind works. I know.
So like for me, I see him at plus 450, and I'm like, relax.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, look, the only things that I have to say about Strider that are not positive, and I have mostly positive things to say about him. Ton of fly balls off the bat. His ground ball rate is 13th percentile. The fastball is actually pretty hittable. Run value on it's pretty average. Barrel rate for him is actually below average. So when he gives up, he can give up some hard contact. Now, generally speaking, the average exit velo for him is around average, but the pitches themselves, the whiff rate, the K rate, the chase rate, the stuff is ridiculous. And the curveball he's been flashing at spring training is definitely a scary thing.
Yeah.
That being said, you look at the 4.39 ERA after the All-Star break last year. He had kind of a rough September quietly. So I'm not 100% bought in on Strider as like this hyper consistent ace. I think there's a little bit too much missing the zone that goes on there. A little bit too much just trying to pump his fastball into barrels. So I think the ceiling is obviously really high.
Yeah.
At plus 450, it's hard for me to see betting value on that one. I'll give you a couple that I like, and you kind of know that I'm looking at things from a betting angle standpoint.
Yeah.
I got 3 that I'm actually looking at in the NL.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if I'm going to bet all 3 of them. I might bet 2 of them. But I like Glasnow at 14-1. The stuff with Glasnow is completely ridiculous. The production with Glasnow is completely ridiculous when he's healthy.
Yeah. You're just worried about health, right?
If he stays healthy, which at this point he seems to be, signaling, and the Dodgers are signaling that what was leading to repeated health concerns with him is an issue that's behind him. I don't know all the details on that, but that's kind of what we're hearing, right? If he stays healthy all year, pitching in that rotation in that ballpark, and with that pitching lab, watch out, right? He could be really special this year. So 14-1, I think there's some interest there. Chris Sale at 35-1.
Wow.
It's easy to forget like how good that dude is when he's good. And now he moves into the National League with a bunch of teams who haven't seen him much. You touched on the fact that he's going to get to face those Mets, those Nationals, those Marlins as well. Yeah. Chris Sale being 35-1 while Strider is plus 450. I mean, I'm not even looking at Strider between those two in terms of odds because a Sale like Glasnow, if he's healthy, could just mow through the NL this year. It wouldn't shock me. Would
are you worried about the health there? I mean, you have to be.
Oh, of course. But you're worried about the health with any pitcher though. At the end of the day, right? But would you be? Let me ask you this: if we look up in August and Chris Sale is 13-3 with a 2.8 ERA, would you actually be that shocked? Like pitching with that lineup behind him, would you be that shocked?
No, and that you make a good point because listen, Chris Sale, as far as stuff and pedigree, I think is among the better pitchers in the game. The problem is, and again, this is the only thing I push back on, and I actually think like you said, for betting value, it's fantastic. I would take it 100%. Last year, 20 starts with a 4.3 ERA, and again, just for the past couple of years behind that, he made 9 starts and 2 starts, and he's entering his age 35 season.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, like you said, as far as betting is concerned, I think the value is definitely there. There's a lot of concerns for me that's going around right here in the old bean.
Yeah. No, understandable, right? That's why that's why we're looking at him at 35-1, right? That's why we're getting the number we are. I just think that there's upside there, and
Certainly.
when I like the ceiling and the numbers that high, it gets my interest. And I'll touch on the last guy because of the three, the most ridiculous number I saw on the entire board is Joe Musgrove at 50-1.
Wow.
Like,
that stuns me.
You just can't justify that for me. I mean, Joe Musgrove was a guy last year. You look at his like Savant page, it doesn't look that different from Spencer Strider's. The fastball is ridiculous, right? The run value on the fastball is 96th percentile, chase rate 99%, expected ERA 90th percentile. Guy pitched to a 305 last year. I mean, what do you want from him, right? I mean, he was
17
phenomenal.
starts. He missed a good portion of the season.
Right, but we're talking about a couple years in a row now for him where he's been excellent, right? Like, this is kind of becoming who he is. And so for me, I just look at a pitcher that across the board is really good. San Diego is still a great place to pitch. He's clearly comfortable there. It's where he's from. To me, Musgrove is kind of a sleeper here, where if he stays healthy all year, I don't see how he doesn't finish top 5 or 6 in the Cy Young. And because to me, he's the best pitcher on that staff still, right? And for me, he probably finishes top 5 or 6 on that staff in Cy Young if he's healthy, and we're getting him 50-1. Like, I mean, let me. I want to pull up a couple of the names around him just to give you a sense of how silly this is. I mean, we're talking 50-1 with him. That puts him next to Luis Severino. That puts him next. That means that his odds are longer than Hunter Green. He's got longer odds than Shota Imanaga. Like, what have any of these dudes proven recently that suggests that they're in the same category with Musgrove? I don't see it. So for me, Musgrove 50-1 is crazy value.
Yeah, Musgrove 51 is crazy value. Just an interesting tidbit here, and I know that this might generate some pushback from others, not from me, really, because I actually agree with you. But in the 8 years that he's been in the major leagues, right, he has never once even been, and this is just Baseball Reference, I'm not even going deep, he hasn't even once been a finalist for Cy Youngs. Like, he hasn't even been like 10th. Like, like, that's pretty interesting to me. And he's had, I mean, when he was an all-star in 2022, I mean, he made 30 starts. He had a sub-3 ERA. Like, and he didn't get a single Cy Young vote. Not one, like, not even first place. Not one Cy Young vote.
Yeah, he should have.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move to MVP. I'll go with the American League because I'm pretty sure you can guess who I've got. And I think, honestly, it isn't even really, and maybe it is a little bit, but I don't really think that it is. I think if Aaron Judge is healthy, I think Aaron Judge could very easily be the best hitter in baseball. I do. Because, look, first of all, he's an analytical monster. Right, everybody loves him from an analytics perspective because he's got tons of power and he gets on base a ton. Like, that's a big thing. But even when he got hurt last year, he still put up 37 bombs. The guy played 100 games. Like, you're trying to get, like, he started the year last year on pace to match what he did when he broke Roger Maris's record. Like, that's a real thing. Now, I understand that people are going to say, okay, Judge is on the wrong side of 30. How much longer can he keep the pace up? And I totally understand that argument. But especially if Juan Soto is hitting in front of him or behind him, right? And this is a much stronger, more fortified Yankee lineup. I think Aaron Judge can do unbelievable damage. He obviously plays in traditionally a very good hitter's park. I know he's not hitting left-handed, but he's plus 550 to win the award. He's either the favorite or the co-favorite to win the award with, quite frankly, maybe his teammate Juan Soto. But listen, I think Aaron Judge is, like, even if the value's not great, I think, like, I don't want to call it free money, but it's pretty close to free money for me.
You're not going to hear an argument from me that Aaron Judge is a bad bet. Right? It's difficult to argue that given what his production looked like when he's healthy. So I want to start with that. But I think when you look at MVP voting and how these things tend to work, we've seen it. We've seen this affect the Dodgers in certain awards at times. Aaron Judge and Juan Soto being in the same lineup creates some fatigue among voters. I think there's a chance that the two of them being in the same lineup hurts both of their chances of winning the award. And the fact that they're both the favorite makes me not quite want to bet it. That being said, you're not going to get an argument from me that he shouldn't be the favorite. I think he should. That being said, to me, a hitter who is of that same ilk, of that same quality, and yet is a step behind both of them and has nobody else in his lineup who's within 20-1 is Yordan Alvarez.
Wow.
If Yordan Alvarez is healthy all year, he's 8-1. Yordan Alvarez, for my money, is the best hitter in baseball when he's healthy, period. Like, I actually think, I think he's special when he's healthy. To me, Yordan Alvarez, again, you want to talk about a bandbox hitter's park. Yankee Stadium qualifies. We know Houston qualifies too. He's going to have guys on base in front of him. He's going to walk a ton, but he's going to have guys on base in front of him. He's going to hit a ton of homers. The only question with him is, can he stay healthy? If you tell me he stays healthy all year and I'm getting him at 8-1, I'm thrilled about that. I think Aaron Judge or Juan Soto, if they weren't on the same team, are both picks that I'd like a little bit better than I do now. That being said, you're not going to hear an argument from me against Judge. I just think I think Yordan's got to win it one of these years. He's just too damn good. So that's where I'm going for my pick, 8-1.
You know what? I concur. I think that, as far as that's concerned, Yordan Alvarez, if you don't think Yordan Alvarez is special, then you're not watching, right? Like, every time you watch the guy hit, it's just insane. He hits over 300. He gets on base 40% of the time. He hits 30 plus, 35 plus home runs a year. Like, maybe you could make an argument for Altuve, but I'm not even really sure that you can. But, like, he's the most productive player in a very, very good Houston Astros lineup. Like, very, very good. And it makes, like I said, another thing, there's a lot of puking for me today. Like, first with Yamamoto, and then the deferred money with Ohtani, and then Blake Snell and all that shit. I'm just saying, there's a lot of puking for me today. It pains me that, the Astros, who I despise very, very much, have had such grand success with somebody like Yordan Alvarez, but you're 100% right. He is ridiculously special, and he will be for a long time. He's still so young. It's so hard to believe. He's only entering his age 27 season, Dalton. Like, it's unbelievable how much better he can still get.
Yeah.
So it really is crazy. All right, National League MVP. I love Freddy Freeman at plus 1,200. I love Freddy Freeman at plus 1,200. Now, I am going to take a wild guess based on the information that you just provided for me, right? Because Ohtani and Mookie Betts are in the same lineup. Well, he's already nodding his head. Because they're in the same lineup, it kind of it fatigues the voters, and it'll take votes away from Freddie Freeman. Here's the thing. What Freddie did last year was, unbelievable. You can make the case that Freddie Freeman had his best year last year as a pro. He's entering his age 34 season. I don't know that he's going to match his doubles total, but as far as a run production standpoint, right, of him producing runs with the bat and then runs being produced with him involved, right, just overall run production, I think it could be the best he's had in his career, because if you have traditionally Betts and Ohtani hitting in front of him, there's going to be a lot of scenarios. You and I discussed this last week. It's going to increase way above what the mean would tell you about how many times he's going to start with runners on base in the first inning. Like, he's just going to get opportunities to hit with runners on base. That's the first thing. And not only that, but even if the Dodgers decide to shift the lineup a bit and they put him in a position where he's scoring more runs, becoming a player that becomes the first benefactor of a run production cycle, I think that that's another part of it that caters into his favor. I know that it might fatigue the voters, but I love Freddie Freeman for MVP. Plus 1,200, I actually think it's a relatively good number for that spot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad number, and I think as highly of Freddie Freeman as anybody. If you made me take a Dodger, I would take Mookie Betts. Just that's probably who I'd favor, but you can't really go. I mean, him, Ohtani, Freeman, all of them are going to be batting right next to each other and have incredible potential to win the award. I don't hate it. You hit on the voter fatigue thing with multiple guys being on the same team. I do think that matters. I think it works against all three of them. I also think the knock with Freddie is the home run numbers are not going to be in the 35, 40, 45 range.
Right.
And so while the RBI numbers are going to be great, the doubles are going to be great, he's not going to have that same punch with the homers and the stolen bases that some of these other guys
will. It's going to hover around 25-ish.
Yeah, so that might work against him a little, but I can't hate the pick. For me, and again, I look at this from a betting value perspective, right? The most likely player to win the award is probably Acuna, but again, we're talking back-to-back voter fatigue. Yep. They don't like doing that. So if I take the Dodgers out of my thought process, I take Acuna out of my thought process, that gives us Tatis in the running. I'm not totally bought in on Tatis staying healthy. I talked about why I like his RBIs under last week. I think Bryce Harper at 10-1 is the pick for me.
Yeah, wow.
Bryce Harper is a guy who is now finally coming back into the season fully healthy. He's playing first base, which is going to be a lot less on his body. It's going to be a lot more of him just focusing on hitting. And Bryce Harper is also a guy who I think he likes to respond to criticism. He likes to, he's very demonstrative in that way, right? And again, we're talking about a tiny ballpark in Philly, a team that lost a series that a lot of people assumed they would win against Arizona last year. I think Harper comes into this season with a big chip on his shoulder, playing in a little baby ballpark, getting a lot of matchups against the Nationals, the Mets, and the Marlins. I think Harper is wildly undervalued because when he's at his best and when he's healthy, he is clearly one of the best and most clutch hitters in baseball. I don't see any reason why he can't hit 40 homers this year. I'm not saying he will, but I don't see any reason why he can't. He'll be in the middle of a lineup where he's going to have good hitters around him, just like we talked about with the other guys. So for me, as far as value is concerned, Harper at 10-1. There's nobody else in that. I mean, I guess you could look at Trey Turner down at 22-1, but I don't think he's going to compete with Harper for that award, especially not from like an RBI's perspective. So, if we're not going to go chalk with Acuna, I think Harper is the way I would look.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's very possible that Acuna does go back-to-back in my mind. I mean, you could very easily make the argument that he's the best overall player in baseball. I mean, I know that, a pitching Ohtani kind of makes the argument tough, but it just from a pure offensive player perspective, just 5 tools, the whole bit, like Acuna could very easily be the best player in baseball, stats independent.
Yeah, and one note, too, because you mentioned Ohtani, he's been insane in the spring. And it's hard to argue that there's value in a number with him at plus 750, especially we touched on the other two guys in that lineup.
Yeah.
It's possible that with him not having to throw bullpens this year, not having to think about pitching scouting reports all year, if that guy unlocks another gear as a hitter, look out. I don't know I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm fascinated to see if it does, because that'd be fun.
Very easily could. All right. So, man, we are already an hour deep. It's this is fun, man. We're trying to move, but listen, we get caught up a lot. By the way, we got a comment earlier before from our by our guy EJ Savage, who hosts the Boys in the Zone podcast on the Grid Network. And he says promptly, I know absolutely nothing about baseball. I think I can appreciate that. He's tuning in anyway. But I drop in and say, what's good, brothers? Thank you, EJ Savage, for tuning in. Listen, I love EJ. He's done a great job for us so far at the network. So, all right, let's move to previewing the AL and the NL Central. We'll try to get through this, as promptly as we possibly can. So let's start right here in the American League. So this is right now where the division kind of sits, right? So last year you saw the Twins. They were the clear favorite in the division. The Tigers kind of overtook the Guardians, which I don't know that a lot of people expected. I think a lot of people expected more from Cleveland last year. Even if it wasn't much more, it was a little bit more. Them finishing it at 76 and 86. And then you had two teams at the bottom of the standings last year. I think a lot of people were surprised with the White Sox, given the kind of buildup that they've had as they've started building their team. You had two teams at the bottom of this division with over 100 losses. Now, Pacoda's now projecting at this point for two teams over 500. It's going to be Minnesota at the top of the division, with Cleveland following them only a game behind. And then it's Detroit, Kansas City, and Chicago. Chicago, the only team that is under 70 wins on the season. Listen, Dalton, I think you and I can kind of expect at this point, this is a relatively ugly division. We touched on it briefly before. It's why I think Pablo Lopez is such a great bet for the American League Cy Young. But here's the thing. I think you and I can both agree that Minnesota is the better team in the division. But just how good do you think they can be generally in the American League, competing with teams like the Yankees and the Astros and the Rangers and Baltimore and whoever else? How good do you think they can be? We'll take a peek at their lineup right now. What do you think about what they've done over the offseason, and what do you think their season outlook is going to look like?
Well, I think Minnesota is in a nice spot because they are clearly, as you said, they're clearly the best team in a not so great division. So I think they can kind of figure out what they have with some of these guys as time goes along. And what's exciting for them is the offensive flashes that they've seen from some of these lesser known guys. I mean, just because I'm somebody who watches the Twins a lot, man, Edouard Julien, Royce Lewis, Matt Wallner, Alex Kirilloff, like these are dudes who are a lot better hitters than most people realize. And you're mixing them in with, obviously Buxton, it's a health question with him, right? But he's looked great this spring. I think it's a spring in his step that he's back in center field. Correa kind of is what he is. Kepler kind of is what he is. Santana, same type of deal. Jeffers is a pretty good hitter. What I like is there's not a single guy when I look at that lineup who has no offensive upside.
Yeah.
Every single hitter in that lineup has offensive upside. It's not like, you look at a lot of the teams in that division and there are 4 or 5 guys you're trotting out there who you're like, man, I hope he can be replacement level. The Twins, I think, have well above replacement level hopes for virtually everybody in their lineup. So it's a really deep team offensively. Pitching wise, Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan is a great way to start a rotation. Now, after that, Bailey Ober has looked, I think, better than even the Twins thought he'd be. If Bailey Ober can continue to be a steady guy in that rotation the way he's been, that'd be a huge plus for them. The back end's a little shaky. I don't know how much you can really trust Louis Varland or Chris Paddock. We'll see if Jordan Balazovic ends up getting back involved in that as well. I know for a long time he was a pitching prospect they were really high on. I think if Minnesota is where we think they'll be come the deadline, that's a team that will be going after pitching. So I think by the time you get to October, that pitching staff will probably look a little bit better. Yohan Duran at the back end of that bullpen is a ridiculously good closer, so that helps. I think that bullpen's not great, but above average with a really good shutdown guy at the back end. I think Minnesota is pretty above average everywhere, not really great anywhere. And in the AL Central, that's more than good enough.
Yeah.
You talk about, well, where do they land with teams like Houston and Texas and the Yankees? I mean, it doesn't really matter now, right? I mean, as long as they can just cruise to a division title and get in, that's what this is all about, right? Like, just roll into the wild card round. You just got to beat somebody 2 out of 3. Then you got to beat somebody 3 out of 5, right? we saw it last year with Arizona. You don't have to be the best team to just kind of find your way through the playoffs. Like playoffs, you're going to hear me talk about this a lot this season. Playoff series in baseball are tiny, borderline meaningless samples. Like guys' playoff numbers, I think, get way over talked about. Teams' playoff histories get way over talked about. These samples are tiny. You just got to get hot for a week. The Pittsburgh Pirates can get hot for a week. So I think, once the Twins get there, I think they like their chances because it's baseball.
Yeah, no, hey, that's true. I think one of the big keys in that lineup, and listen, we both know that I think he's going to be playing with a bit of a chip on his shoulder this year. Carlos Correa was really disappointing last year. I mean, he had a really poor season for Minnesota after, once again, hitting the free agent market and kind of striking out, right? He originally has the deal with the Giants. That goes south, right? Failed physical. Then he signs that massive contract with the Mets. That goes south. And then now he's just, all right, I'm back in Minnesota for a contract that I didn't really want. And then he underproduces. And so I just think that there's going to be a little bit of a chip on his shoulder as far as that is concerned. So let's take a little bit of a look at deeper in this division. We'll kind of get through some of these teams. The Guardians, I think, are a really interesting team. I don't know, what their ceiling is. I think the top of their lineup is actually very intriguing. Stephen Kwan, I love at the top of this lineup just as a contact traditional leadoff guy. Andres Jimenez, I think, has done a really good job as far as living up to his hype as a former Met prospect. He was pretty highly touted. And again, one of the guys that really one of the better players in baseball that doesn't get talked about enough because he plays for Cleveland and quite frankly in a fairly I don't want to say irrelevant, but a fairly, not as exciting division is Jose Ramirez. I mean, he's just an unbelievably good player and a fantastic offensive player. This is a team that I think is almost aging in the wrong direction. I don't know how much their future provides here. Bieber is getting older. He's getting more injured. I don't want to spend too much time on these lower level AL Central teams. I'll say it for now, but let's.
Well, Mike,
what do you have to say here?
Mike, I'm glad to hear you say that I'm glad to hear you say lower level AL Central team because that's what the Guardians are now, in my opinion. I think this team's ass. I really do. If you want to go ahead and pull their roster back up, I mean,
yeah,
that lineup, like Jose Ramirez is a stud, right? Josh Naylor can hit a bit, but I think we've seen his ceiling. You're telling me, I mean, like you talk about the back end of the Padres lineup. 5 through 9 here: Ramon Laureano, Bo Naylor, Kyle Manzardo, Gabriel Arias, Miles Straw. Like, yeah, there might be some upside with some of these younger guys, but what is there to be excited about here? Like, this is a well below average lineup. Stephen Kwan is fine, right? I mean, I'm not saying he's terrible. Andres Jimenez is fine, he's a good defender, whatever. But there's nothing to be excited about here. This is a team that is going to have to get on base and be they're going to need a whole bunch of guys to outperform what they're projected to be if they want to finish in the top half of this division, in my opinion. The rotation, Shane Bieber has been very slowly regressing over time. All the numbers suggest that regression should continue. I think they should have traded him last year. I think that you're going to see that regression continue this year. Tanner Bybee is fine. Logan Allen is just a guy. Carlos Carrasco is awful. Tristan McKenzie is the only bright spot for me there. And again, you have health questions there with him coming off so many injuries. Gavin Williams already hurt. So the big strength for Cleveland is the pitching, and the pitching is not that great. Clase at the back of the bullpen for now until he gets traded. I think this team is 15, 20 games under by the deadline. I think they trade away Bieber. I think they trade away Clase.
Wow.
They're not going to finish second in that division. So, I mean, I know we're looking at them second because they did that last year, and Pacoda says blah, blah, blah about them winning 86 games or 84 games, whatever it says.
Yeah, right.
I mean, stop. They're not a good ball club. Who I do think is going to get better is Detroit. I think Detroit is taking real steps forward this year. This rotation, look, Jack Flaherty's not what he once was, but this is still a solid starting pitcher. Tariq Skubal is a budding star. He's somebody else who I considered talking about in the Cy Young segment, but he's sitting there at 9-1. There's no value there. But some of these other guys, like Alex Fado, looked okay last year. Reese Olson looked decent last year. Casey Mize was a number one pick, right? There's plenty of potential there, plenty of potential with Matt Manning. The upside with this pitching staff goes pretty deep to the point where if one or two of these last four names are decent, that's a really solid rotation in a bad division. So I think they're going to pitch their way to, past the Guardians. Look, the lineup here, I'm not going to argue that the lineup here is great. But
there's
Jake
a lot
Rogers,
of upside in this lineup, though, too. I mean, you look at it, there's like legitimately like 5 guys who are on the younger side in this lineup that have real upside, right? You're looking at like Parker Meadows, Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson. I think we're kind of waiting for Spencer Torkelson to finally pop off a little bit. Kerry Carpenter's already been a relatively productive big leaguer, and I know that they're really excited about Colt Keefe as well. So there's a lot of upside in this lineup too.
There is. I mean, I think they have. I'll put it this way: like I talked about how the Twins go 9 guys deep with guys that they think can be above average offensive players. Tigers aren't quite there, but I think they go probably 7 or 8 guys deep with guys that they at least think have offensive upside. Now, Javier Baez is the albatross in the room, the guy they're paying $25 million who can't hit a baseball. I think Baez is a guy that they ought to just ship away and see if they can get a prospect of any kind for, or maybe some cash for, to some team that's desperate at shortstop.
I don't know that anybody would take him. I just don't.
I don't think so either. But so that, like, I'll put it this way: the Tigers aren't going to be good, but the division's bad, so they can win 84 games. That's how I look at it.
Hey, well, look, that's kind of the impression that I get too. I mean, Pacoda has them at 76 and 86, actually worse than what they were last year. And I don't know that I agree. I just like, you're getting another year out of younger players. And like I said, I agree. I think this division is a little bit, it is bad. Let's talk about Kansas City for a minute, because they were actually pretty active this offseason, especially as far as pitching were concerned. Now look, they did not make moves that are groundbreaking, right? These are what I would call just kind of like foundational, fill in the roster kind of moves, right? Maybe a start of a building process when they signed Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha. I think that's one thing. They really saw a lot of great things out of Cole Reagans last year. That's a really nice young and up and coming pitcher. And then you look at this lineup, and again, this is not something that you're to write home about, but there are several players, I think, in this lineup, especially when you talk about, obviously, Bobby Witt Jr. speaks for itself, but guys like Vinny Pasquantino, guys like Nick Pratto, I think are guys that you can say, all right, hey, listen, we have a future, right? We have a plan in place for the future for Kansas City. Where do you kind of see them stacking up? Obviously, we see Minnesota at the top, but and this is kind of the way it is for the rest of this division. I feel like for the rest of this division, it's going to be like, okay, who's got the brightest future going forward, right? It'll be kind of a semi-in-division competition between Detroit and Kansas City, but Kansas City's got a pretty intriguing young team coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kansas City is going to be better than Cleveland. Give you
it's something.
Cleveland. I think Cleveland's going to fall apart. I mean, now look, I've been wrong on Cleveland before, and we'll see. I'll eat crow if I am, but I think Cleveland's gonna kind of bottom out here. And I think Kansas City comes up, finishes third in this division. I think Kansas City is the team that finishes 76 wins, 75 wins. Like, they're not an average team yet, but they're a team that's kind of starting their ascent. I think they're kind of like what we saw with Detroit last year. Cole Reagans is a stud. Michael Wacha provides them another solid starter. Seth Lugo is perfectly serviceable. Brady Singer is perfectly serviceable. Jordan Lyles is a dumpster fire, but we'll see what happens with that 5 spot. The lineup, like you said, there are some things to be excited about here. Vinny Pasquantino coming back healthy. Salvador Perez is still Salvador Perez somehow. Hunter Renfroe is a offensively productive player. Bobby Witt Jr. is a stud. And guys like Michael Garcia and Kyle Isbell are interesting. So I think there's enough here that in a bad division, they're going to be at least competitive. I don't think they're a playoff team yet, But I think they're kind of like a year away from being a year away. Like they're kind of on that path. So, if I'm a Royals fan, I'm like, hey, we're moving. We're actually moving in a direction.
Yeah.
So, like I'll put it this way: they're not bringing back Zach Greinke, and I mean I love Zach Greinke, but they're not bringing him back out and rolling him out there every fifth day.
Yeah.
I think they're a team that's actually moving in a direction. So good for them.
Yeah.
The same can't be said about the last team in this division. I really don't want to spend a lot of time on the Chicago White Sox if we can
Yeah.
help it, Mike.
Yeah.
This team's awful. I mean, they're forcing Garrett Crochet into the rotation. They're going to make him their opening day starter. Good luck with that, right? It's kind of like the Jordan Hicks thing in San Francisco, where it's like I don't think you really need to mess with it. The guy throws fucking flames. Like I think it's kind of weird, but I mean, other than that, if you look at the rest of this rotation, Feddy, Soroka, Flexen. I mean, Soroka, maybe there's something left in the tank. Flexen is what he is. Nick Nastrini, former Dodgers prospect. There's some talent there, but again, we're talking real young guy here, not a lot of experience. And Tuki Toussaint, his days as a prospect are well behind him. The lineup is, you look at the lineup and there are some names there, but we know what this team is. They're not very good.
Yeah, you're right. They're definitely not. I mean, as far as you and I had said this from the beginning, is that this is a team that could very easily make absolutely zero progress going into next year. This is not a tremendously young team either. I mean, they have a lot of veteran players. I mean, Andrew Benintendi, as far as disappointment was concerned, I mean, Andrew Benintendi was awful for a lot of last year. The top of this lineup can, and that's a key word here, can be interesting, right? With Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Andrew Vaughn, whoever. But I agree with you. I think that there's just not a lot of room for upside or excitement when it comes to the White Sox. I think
let's move on. We don't need to talk about the Chicago White Sox anymore.
All right, let's move to the NL Central here. This division, I think, expects to be fair. I shouldn't say fairly, extremely competitive. That's kind of the outlook I have for this team. Milwaukee ended up winning it, pretty much running away last year, 92-70. I don't think that that's going to be the case this year. There were a lot of changes to Milwaukee's roster over the offseason. Chicago came in second. Cincinnati is a team that I think a lot of people are excited about with the amount of young talent they have coming up. Pittsburgh and St. Louis just fell so flat last year. Veteran roster, terrible in terms of what they got out of their starting rotation last year. This year, though, this is what's interesting about this. Pacoda right now is projecting the Cardinals to come on top of the division with 85 wins. The Cubs pretty much, honestly, staying where they were almost at 82-80, finishing in second, followed by Milwaukee at under 500, Cincinnati at under 500, and Pittsburgh is under 500. Let's talk about the Cardinals a little bit, because I think this is an interesting team. I kind of feel like I got the impression last episode that you and I had sort of differing opinions on this. This is a team that I didn't expect to be as bad as they were. I just didn't, right? Like, this is a lineup that I think can actually be very, very productive with Goldschmidt, Arenado, Contreras, Gorman. When they get Lars Nootbaar back, right? Tommy Edman comes back. A lot of good young players like Carlson and Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn, who they like at shortstop. Like, this is something here. And then you look at that rotation. I mean, regardless of whether or not you love the move, you like the moves or not, right? Getting Sonny Gray, I think, is a big deal. Now, again, it depends on what his injury looks like, but they definitely made the effort of trying to improve this starting rotation, even with smaller moves like Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn. I know that you're not a Lance Lynn fan. I know you can go off on that all day, but I think that there's almost nowhere to go but up for St. Louis, and especially in a division where Milwaukee is, I think, definitely due for regression. They could definitely jump up. I don't know that I agree with Pacoda if I would put them up there, but I do think it's possible.
Yeah, look, I'll follow you a little bit with the Cardinals offense.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of potential to score runs with this team. I think Nootbaar being out and Edman being out to start the year hurts them. I think that team can score some runs, right? I'm not going to argue with you there. I also think that there are some guys who kind of have to prove it still.
Sure.
But dude, this rotation. Don't start with me with this rotation. I mean, Sonny Gray on the IL already. What a mess, because that's the only dude they got. Miles Michaelis is just a guy. Kyle Gibson is just a guy. Lance Lynn is not even just a guy. Steven Matz, maybe you get 4 productive innings out of him every once in a while. And who knows what the hell Zach Thompson is. This rotation is awful. The bullpen outside of Ryan Helsley is awful. This is one of the worst pitching staffs in baseball. They went out and overpaid for old guys to try to shore up and, kind of plug holes. It's not going to work. It's already not working. This rotation is going to be awful. It's going to keep them from being much of anything special. I think the Cardinals are a 500 team because they can't pitch. And I think if their bats don't live up to the potential, I think this might be a bad team. So I am not with you on being high on the Cardinals. I don't think they should be the favorite to win that division. I think that I have a feeling Marmol might not last through the season.
I just gave him an extension.
I still think he might not last through the season. Those fans don't deal well with things not going well. That's an arrogant fan base in St. Louis.
They shouldn't have fired Mike Schilt. I don't even know why. Why did they fire Mike Schilt in the first place?
I mean, he's in San Diego now, so I guess we'll see if he can prove that. But
yeah, right.
No, I think that team is not very good. It's one of the worst pitching staffs in the big leagues, in my opinion. It's truly a terrible pitching staff, and it's a lineup that's good, but it's not a lineup that's like Braves good or Dodgers good.
Well, no,
it's a lineup that's good. Paul Goldschmidt's 36, 37 now. Arenado's getting into his 30s. Yeah, there are some young, exciting hitters in that lineup, but they're a couple injuries away from the lineup being pretty average, and the starting pitching is bad.
Yeah.
So I think this is a team that's going to give up a ton of runs. They're going to struggle to stay in ball games. They're going to blow leads. I'm not high on St. Louis at all. If you ask me who wins that division today, I'm going with the Chicago Cubs. I think that, all in all, I think this is the best team in the division. Because you just look across the roster, I think this is a rotation that is solid. It's not great, but it's solid. Justin Steele, we're talking about a guy who's like 5th or 6th in potential Cy Young potential. He's a really good pitcher. Shota Imanaga, I think he's just going to be an innings eater for him. I think he'll do the job. Kyle Hendricks kind of is just Kyle Hendricks. I think the fact that he gets to sit in a 3 or 4 spot for them now makes a big difference. And some of these other guys like Wisniewski is, at least competent. Assad is competent. I don't think the back end of the rotation is particularly great, but I think the top end of the rotation is pretty good. And I think when you look at what this lineup can do, I think, Horner, Suzuki, Happ, Bellinger, Swanson, Morel, Bush, doesn't even mention Patrick Wisdom, who I think can make an impact with his power. I think it's a team that, look, again, this division's not as bad as the AL Central, but it's still not very good. It's competitive, but it's not very good. I don't think there are any 90-win teams in this division.
No.
I think the Cubs can win 87 or 88 games. I think Bellinger coming back is huge, for one. But I think the Cubs can win 87 or 88 games and win this division. Part of it, too, the bullpen's pretty good. It's pretty good. Adding a guy like Yency Almonte, he was pretty solid for the Dodgers the last couple years. Drew Smiley, he can play kind of that bridge role, right? I mean, we'll see if they get anything out of him, but
they like Adbert Alzolay,
Alzolay at the back of the bullpen is pretty shut down. This is a pretty decent team, and it's a team that I think has room to grow in the sense that I think they will invest in that roster if they look good midseason.
Yeah.
And I think they will look pretty good midseason. So for me, the Cubs are probably the team I'd favor in that division. Milwaukee, it's just hard for me to see them scoring enough runs. Last year you had Corbin Burns, you had, Brandon Woodruff pitching you had those two guys pitching semi-consistently. I think that makes a big difference when Freddy Peralta is your number 3 as opposed to your number 1. I like Freddy Peralta a lot, but he's not a number 1. And after him, I mean, Wade Miley, you see flashes. Jacob Junis is a reliever. Colin Ray's a nobody. DL Hall's a once upon a time prospect. Joe Ross is Joe Ross. What? And then look at this lineup. I mean, I guess Rhys Hoskins is all right, but he's coming off a big injury. Willie Adames can hit for some power, but what is this team?
They're due for regression. I think Milwaukee is without a doubt due for massive regression. I mean, I think a lot of what they're going to look for this season, anything to get excited about for Milwaukee right now, is to see the development of Jackson Chourio. Like, I think that's really the big part of this.
Totally. And you know what I didn't mention too? Devin Williams is out.
Yeah, right. He's out for 3 months, 4 months.
So who do you rely on in that bullpen? Like, by the time he comes back, they're going to be 10 games under 500.
Right.
I don't think this team's very good. I don't think the Cardinals are very good. I know you disagree with me there.
No, I honestly, I'll let me stop you right there, because I don't know that I would consider myself high on the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are improved. I think the Cardinals could be improved, like almost like you said. I think the Cardinals could be 10, 12 games better than what they were last year. That's what I think, right? Now, because again, where they were last year, they won 71 games last year. They were awful. And as I said before, they had the worst starting pitching of anybody in the league. They were absolutely terrible in that department. I think they're improved in that area. Does that get them more wins?
Mike, we got news. Blake Snell reportedly agrees to a deal with the San Francisco Giants.
No way. Are you serious?
2 years, $62 million with an opt-out. Blake Snell to the Giants.
Wow.
I'm just gonna let this sit with you here.
Okay. All right. Hold on a minute, because first of all, I'm stunned, because I genuinely thought the Giants were done. Right. I really thought that once Farhan Zaidi said we're done, I believed him. I did. Like, usually when they say, yeah, we're done, usually I would say, yeah, okay, I believe you. Wow. I'm disappointed. I really am. 2 years, $62 million. I mean, man, that really is disappointing. That really is disappointing.
I figured you wouldn't mind me interrupting our musings about the Milwaukee Brewers to talk about.
No, you can definitely do that. Wow, man. Oh my God. I mean, look, I can comfortably say this. It's not the Astros, right? Like that's the plus side of this, is he is playing on the other side of the country in the other league. I'm okay with that. Yeah. The question really is more about, now what do the Yankees do? You got your Cole's out for, 2 to 3 months. I mean, he might not come back until middle of the summer somewhere. Yeah. And boy, man, oh man. Yeah. See, Bryson Carver here, Snell to the Giants from John Heyman. Okay. So let's leave this up for a second. So, just to interrupt here, we just got the breaking news: 2 years, $62 million with an opt-out. Blake Snell goes to the San Francisco Giants. You kind of got my reaction. Dalton, what's yours?
Well, I think that the gauntlet that is the NL West just got a little bit tougher. It's, as a Dodger fan, I'm obviously not a big fan of this. Blake Snell is a guy that I think can do a lot of damage in that ballpark in San Francisco. I think it's a great fit for him personally. I think he will put up good numbers there. So, I mean, the reality is that something that you've seen NL West teams care a lot about in recent years is going and getting left-handed pitchers that they can throw at the Dodgers.
Yes.
That's been a big thing in that division for a while now. So, it makes a ton of sense that the Giants would have gone after him, especially because, I know they said they were done, but they were also in on Ohtani. They were in on a lot of the big names. It shouldn't be that shocking to us that the Giants were ready to spend some money. And there were kind of some rumblings of this, right? I mentioned it earlier, actually, in this show, that I thought they were kind of quietly one of the competitors. So, I'm not shocked by it. I thought it might be the Astros. I was, for me, kind of hoping it'd be the Astros because I don't want to deal with facing Snell. But then again, the Dodgers are patient enough that they'll just wait till he throws, they'll wait till he walks 5 or 6 guys. But, hey, we'll see. Good for him.
Yeah, I mean, almost not good for him. I mean, 2 years, $62 million for the guy who just won the NL Cy Young Award, I think there's definitely some meat left on the bone as far as that market's concerned. I mean, my God.
Yeah, we'll see how that opt out ends up looking too. I don't know
Yeah,
whether it's
right.
team set, player set, or what, but
Yeah.
hey, good for him. It makes sense for the Giants. That NL West is going to be nasty, man.
Yeah.
It's going to be nasty, and it
Yeah.
makes me feel even better about something I got coming in the hot corner. So, all right,
Yeah.
let's finish up the Central, and let's get the hot corner and get out of here because
Yeah.
we're at an
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah, we're running an hour and a half. We're running a little bit late. I think the predictions ran a little bit late here. I just want to briefly touch on the Reds because I think the Reds are interesting. They are one of these teams where I think their ceiling is unbelievably high, but their floor can be unbelievably low. Noelvi Marte obviously suspended for PEDs, but this is a lineup with a lot of great young talent. Obviously, everybody loves Ellie De La Cruz, Matt McClain, Spencer Steer got a lot of attention last year, and they definitely made some efforts in improving the rotation, as small as they may be with Nick Martinez and Frankie Montas. But what do you make of this Cincinnati Reds team briefly before we go into your hot corner?
Yeah, I think they're fine. I think it's a lot of young guys who, some of whom might like. I think Ellie De La Cruz probably takes a step forward this year after kind of getting exposed late last year. That kid's too talented to be held down forever. But I think some of these other guys are probably due for a step back, like Matt McClain, Spencer Steer. Some of these, like even TJ Friedel. Like I'm hoping for these guys to have success because Cincinnati's right up the road here. I have a ton of fun going to their games and going up to Great
Yeah.
American Ballpark and all that. It's a team that I'd like to be good. I do think they finished second in that division. I think they maybe compete for a wild card, but I think realistically, right around 500 is where I have them, and the rotation's a big reason why. It's just look, Hunter Green, the stuff is there, but we just haven't seen it translate yet. Frankie Montas is okay. Him pitching at Great American Ballpark with the fly balls he can give up. Ugh. Nick Martinez, okay. Graham Ashcraft, like flashes, right? Andrew Abbott's the one guy that I think could potentially be a lot of fun. Nick Lodolo is obviously a guy that there's a lot of excitement around, but obviously the health concerns there.
Yeah.
I think they're going to give up a lot of runs. I think they're going to score a decent number of runs. They're going to be a fun team to watch. But realistically, I think they're a 500 team whose ceiling has them in a wild card series, maybe.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with you. I would say that they're a more exciting team than they are good, at least in my mind. Listen, just because we have it here, I think you and I are both kind of in agreement. Pittsburgh just isn't going to be very good this year. They've got some nice young players, O'Neill Cruz, Brian Hayes. Obviously, we know what Brian Reynolds is. But I think that you and I are kind of both in agreement here. This is a team that's probably slated for last in this division. I mean, I don't know how you feel about St. Louis to this point, but
Look, I mean, I'm way down on St. Louis. I am. I'm way down on Milwaukee. I think the Pirates are going to take some more games from those teams than they have in the past. I think the Pirates are going to be better than they were.
Yeah,
it's still not a competitive ball club. But there are some floor raisers in that lineup, right? I mean, going and getting Rowdy Tellez, going and getting, Michael A. Taylor, O'Neill Cruz coming back is huge. That kid's unbelievable, and he's been killing it in spring training.
Henry Davis intrigues me as well.
Oh, Henry Davis had the sky's the limit for that kid. I mean, so there's some fun here. I think it's a team that, to me, the Pirates, there's some similarities with them and the Royals, where it's like at least you can see a direction.
Yeah.
There are concerns about will the team spend when they need to spend to actually become what they want to be. But look, I mean, Mitch Keller is good. Martin Perez has been a pretty productive guy even in his veteran years. Domingo Herman, I mean, hey, maybe he'll eat some innings for them. Marco Gonzalez might eat some innings for them. I mean, look, pitching gets rough before long, and losing Oviedo is a bummer because I think that guy's pretty good. But hey, at least the Pirates are moving in a direction. Kind of like we talked about with Kansas City. They're moving in a direction. They're going to be better than they were last year, right? I think they can win 70 games. So we'll see.
Yeah, they're just right. You and I are both kind of in agreement here. They're just not in contention as of yet for anything as regarding the playoffs or the division or anything of that sort. All right, let's move over to Dalton's hot corner. You got a couple of bets for us. Maybe put a little bit more money in our pocket. What do you have?
Yeah, I got two. So the first one is one that I kind of hinted at earlier. I'm pulling up the number now on DraftKings to make sure that it is still where it was even just earlier today. The San Diego Padres season win total, I bet that over 83.5. I don't think that number is as high as it could be. That was a number I got at FanDuel. That's actually exactly where it is at DraftKings right now. The over is available at -105. I just think this team's better than a 500 ball club. Like, the lineup's above average, the pitching staff's above average, the bullpen's above average. They're in a tough division. That doesn't help, but you still get to play the Rockies 12 times. So I think that there's plenty of reason to believe that the Padres are an above average team, a wild card quality team. Over 83.5, that's really all you're asking them to be, is just over 500. So that's one that I would definitely take a swing at.
Yeah.
In the interest of time, I'll jump over to my other one as well because it's semi-related and it actually got even more of a boost from what we just saw. I got this at plus 350 a couple weeks ago. I think you can still get it. I know at FanDuel it's still available at plus 250. Shop around, you might get a better number than even that. Colorado Rockies to have the worst record in baseball. Plus 350, plus 250, whatever you get it at. The Giants adding Snell only beats that drum louder. They have 4 legitimate contending teams in their division with them. They are going to get the runaround all year long. And that rotation with Marquez and Sensatella out even more so. You're rolling out there with Kyle Freeland, Cal Quantrill, Austin Gomber, Ryan Feltner, and Dakota Hudson at Coors Field with a bad bullpen and a lineup that is not really built for Coors Field either. That team is going to be bad, potentially losing 110 games bad. I think they're going to be worse than the Oakland A's, who I think are at least going to be a tiny bit better. They're going to be awful. So for me, Colorado should be even money to have the worst record in baseball. They're clearly worse than Pittsburgh. They're clearly worse than Kansas City. Chicago, the White Sox might be the team to give them a run for that this year, but at least you look at that White Sox lineup and there are some names. So Colorado, worst team in baseball. They played the Dodgers 12 times, Padres, Giants, Diamondbacks. Where do the wins come from for them?
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that there's a real shot that they could be the overall worst team in baseball. Like you said, even worse than the Oakland A's. If we take a look at the A's right here, I mean, listen, this is not a good team by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, Colorado is looking at a team that, you're right. Where do the wins come from in this division with this lineup and this rotation? I don't know that it's there. It's just not there. Okay. So long show today. We're at almost an hour and 38 minutes. But hey, thanks for sticking in. We appreciate it. To everybody that is still with us, I am Mike Guido. That's Dalton Brown. This is the Bicoastal Baseball Podcast on the Grid Network, the only baseball podcast, exclusive baseball podcast on the Grid Network. Dalton, any closing thoughts, or you're pretty much ready to go to bed?
Yeah, my closing thought is go Dodgers. We'll see you at 6 a.m. Wednesday morning.
Yeah, there you go. We have baseball on Wednesday. Blake Snell is a Giant. I am going to go cry myself to sleep. All right. We'll see you.